Good morning. Well, it's morning here. I don't know where it is where you are or when you are watching. I don't know if you're watching live. I don't know if you're going to watch later. I don't know if you're not going to watch. Well, I do know that if you're hearing me say that, then you're watching. And I know that typically what's going to happen is that people will jump in and jump out and not get the whole thing because they're distracted by the YouTube thing, that column down the side that has all of the other things you can look at. There's always somebody more interesting than me. And there's always somebody more interesting than the other guy who was more interesting than, well, you get the point. You could always looking for more. Now, today we're going to look for more, but we're going to look in a slightly different direction. And it's one that some recoil from. I don't know that they do so more or less today than they ever did before, but we're going to start to look at numbers. We're going to start to get practical. We're going to start to say, these are things that prime leaders need to understand. And I know that prime leader doesn't take any mathematics courses in seminary. And I know he says, oh, that's not my thing. Well, I don't really care if it's his thing from the numerical standpoint. Although I think it's probably wise if he knows something about the numerics of it all. But the concepts behind are what matter. We are recognizing that many people who are watching here are in the doldrums. There's no wind in their sails. There's no sense that they're getting anywhere. And there's kind of a ho-hum engagement. I got the 1, 2, 3 quick stories for you. I tried to help a church years ago that had a massive auditorium. They had about 70 people attending at the time in this auditorium. Beautiful old auditorium would seat, I'll guess, 700, counting the balcony. It was arranged, what I really liked, it was a kind of a semicircle sort of a thing, which I think is advantageous because at least out of the side of your eye, you get to see somebody else. Anyway, they tended to be a very few people who were sort of involved in the church, but desperately wanting to be something, who were sitting right up front. They had pretty good music. I got up to speak and I explained some things and I said, I want you to do something different next week. Kind of second row from the back, there was a band of 2 rows of people across, including the guy who had been at the church for all of his life, I guess, and was quite a significant member in the church, a good man now with the Lord. And I said, I want you to do me a favor next week. I want you to come back to demonstrate that you're tracking with me by just moving up 1 row forward. I don't want you to come to the front. I want you to move 1 row. So I went through the same thing. I was there 3 weeks and not one person. That church shut down. Now, they said they wanted to grow. They'd been through an assessment that said, if you don't change, you'll stay the same. And if you stay the same, you'll be on the route to oblivion. And they just didn't want to hear that cancer diagnosis of stage 4 church cancer. And they shut down. And that's one story. They weren't paying attention to numbers. Another story is that when I was a summer student, I had a wonderful time living in the home of a pastor. They'd opened up their home and I lived in one room and we had chats in the evenings and so on. He was a wonderful guy. He was a writer. He was the one who got me to think that maybe I could be a writer someday. But what I remember, the church was doing pretty good. It was a small village, a church, and people came from miles around for the church. He had started the church, I don't know, I'll say 15, 17 years earlier, lost track. He started it from scratch, and he built it on his personal dynamic and his preaching knowledge. And people came, and they came. But what was fascinating to me was we would ride home afterwards. The house wasn't really that far from the church, but we'd ride in his old Citroen. You remember them? He loved Citroen cars, the French car. They were the best cars ever in his view. Very good. I'd ride in the back seat and he'd talk with us and he'd say, well, I thought that went really well today. And the Smiths weren't there and the Joneses weren't there, but the attendance was really good. But if the Martins had been there, and he focused on the people who weren't there that week. And that was the last he mentioned them for the whole week. And I thought, there's always going to be somebody who's not there. But he was looking at the attendance figure. And that is maybe the worst thing to focus your attendance, your attention on. Maybe. It's not all bad, but it may be the worst place for the prime leader to focus his attention. Well, I'll skip the third story because it took too long to tell those two. And we're going to today look at the advantage that a village church that is very ordinary has. I believe that the ordinary church in many, many ways is just the same as the extraordinary church. Extraordinary church is different in some ways, but it's the same in some other ways. And we're going to cover all of this in the book that I'm coming down the home stretches on it, but I always think of something more to add. And then that adds another 10 pages, and so I have to try and keep it small. You try writing a book, it's difficult. You get everything in that should be in this particular book, but not in another book that I'm also working on. It's a challenge, and I want the book to be most helpful for people because I know that books have a tendency to stay on a shelf for some time, and maybe, just maybe the second time you pick it up, it will be of more benefit to you than even the first time. Well, a lot of people say, well, in our church, and yes, your church is different. There are some differences in your church, and there are some advantages, and it's also exactly the same as every other church on the planet. Fundamentally, you've got the same Word of God, you've got the same Holy Spirit, you've got the same personal mechanisms, you've got the same collective set of flaws. You've got wacky Uncle George over here, you've got disabled Aunt Annie over here, and you've got keener Frank here who comes in and says, well, why don't we fix everything all at once? And you say, hold on, Frank, you just don't want to fix things. And before you know it, Frank's got it. This is the life of church. You're going to find out that somebody has a deep embedded sin in their life that you didn't know about, and they've been doing it for years, maybe embezzling the church or some other moral failure. Every church has its flaws, and all churches have their culture. And when you settle, then you're in trouble. And I want the ordinary church to understand that it has tremendous advantages. And I'm going to say, if you pay attention to the material that we cover in the book and in these broadcasts, you will be more advantaged than many of the megachurch pastors that I've known down through the years. They don't pay attention to what I'm going to teach you. One of the things that is really a problem for anybody is comparing yourself with the other guy. Paul said, don't do it. Don't do it. So why do you do it? Why do you say, well, that church down the street, why is it that my friends who are in the larger churches say, well, and they start quoting attendance figures to me. They say, how big's your church? And they give me the same attendance figure. And I say, that's not the size of your church because they're not there every Sunday. I mean, on average, people, the current research says they attend 1.7 Sundays a month. So when you work that all out in general terms, whatever your attendance figure is, there's twice as many people in your church. And they're not going to be there every Sunday. And some people are those who have the habit and they're there every Sunday. And the older they get, the more stable they are in their attendance. Probably the stronger they are in their financial donations to the church as well. But the church is much bigger than that. All churches are the same. You will never have everybody out every week. I was doing a consulting job with a church years ago, and I was explaining that principle. And one of the deacons of the church said, no, that's not true. Our church has all the faithful people. Yeah, that church shut down too. Because they did not recognize they had a ministry that went far beyond an attendance number. And they were kind of saying, we're special. And there's nothing special about your church. Oh, there may be some things that are better than other things, but where you're strong on one thing, you're weak on another. And it's very important to recognize that you got to live within the framework of what you have, not what you wish you had, of the framework of what is possible, not the framework of what, oh, well, we can't do this because of that. If you don't have enough parking spots, it's going to be trouble. So you have to figure a way to figure that out. But these are just details. You still have the same Holy Spirit, the same Word of God, and the same established principles that have been put together down through the years. Okay, today we're going to look at numbers. We're going to look at 8 numbers, I'll say nobody, but so rarely count. There's one organization that did an analysis of hundreds of churches, and they'd set standards. I think there were 7 of them. I forgot the number of standards to who has a discipling church. And even though they'd sifted through hundreds, I think thousands of churches, they could only find 2 churches in North America that met all their standards. But I will guarantee you that even those 2 churches weren't paying attention to what I'm going to tell you. I can guarantee it, but the guarantee might not be true. They might be paying attention, but I doubt it. Because there are 5 stages that every church runs through. And the arithmetic of those 5 stages comes out of those things. All these things are the same, just the same, whether you're a church of 40 or 4,000. I'm not going to talk about a program to adopt. I'm going to talk about these 5 stages, and they're 5 A's. I hope you can remember them. Use acquisition, the new people who are arriving. I remember, and one of my friends of many years ago was thought to be the fair-haired boy because his church was growing like crazy. And I remember sitting at dinner with him at a convention. He was talking about his church, and he said, just sit there with a catcher's mitt. He just kept moving to town. It was a bedroom community, and the church kept growing, and he knew that it was only happening because of the accidents of where he was. And people were wishing they could have a church like his. Well, if your community isn't growing, your community is getting small, then you got a problem. If you have a problem with the people of your church, like my home church, they had kind of started in the area near the church building, but had gradually moved to more affluent houses away, and it was kind of like a donut with a hole in the middle. Then, you've got challenges. A different challenge than when everybody's moving in. And when people moved into the houses, they vacated in the neighborhood. They hadn't recaptured those people. Acquisition is people arriving. Now, we're going to drill down on that going further as to what you do with old friends and new friends, going all the way through. I got so much to say. It is available to you as an ordinary church. The things that I'm going to tell you will cost you nothing or almost nothing financially. They will cost you something in attention, but it won't cost you thousands of hours to run campaigns or anything like that. There are simple things that you can do, even if your church is a typical church, 25, 30, 60 people on a typical Sunday. Assimilating people focused in that first year, whether they actually get into the life of the church. And there's things that you can do. They can't understand everything in your church. And if you don't publish a church bulletin every week, and I can take that or leave that, but you need to at least have some way that these people can very quickly get a summary of what all you're about and what you do and what you stand for. Because when they come in one at a time or one family at a time. And they need to very quickly figure out who you are, and you need to have, well, we're going to get into all the things you can do to assimilate these people into the life of your church. It's really simple. You say hello. Post your phone. I'm not sure I know them. I'd be embarrassed if they've been coming here a long time. Don't go to them and say, are you new here? That's one of the ways you can actually shoot yourself in the foot. Don't ask that question. They might be new. They might be saying, yeah, we've been coming here for 10 weeks and nobody's noticed. or 10 years, or I'm on the church board if it's a big church. You'll never know. So just say, I don't believe we've met. And if we have, I'm sorry I forgot your name. You'll be fine. They'll accept that. So we move from this assimilation to the adherence, the people that are staying, the people that are there. And much of church life focuses on what you're doing with the people who are there. Now, what you've got to understand is they're not there every Sunday. They're certainly not all engaged in small groups. Maybe 60%, 70% of your adults are in small groups, and that's not a bad thing. But 30% are not. So if you try to pour everything through your small group system, you're going to miss a large portion of the people who adhere to your church. You say, well, they'll get involved in small groups, and I'm not going to visit them in the hospital. You're going to lose. You have to be attentive to what's happening with people. The energy level rises, their interest, they're nodding, they're smiling, and then they fall asleep. Eventually fall away. Some people estimate this is a long ramp out of the church that's about 18 months. You got to find ways to pay attention, give attentiveness to this slow fade. People don't break their lives up all at once. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. The Casting Crowns song from yesterday. And then there's the attrition, the leaving. Okay, so you can see that there's 5 things on the way in and on the way out. So the size changes. A church of 40 has that same 5 stages. A church of 4,000 has all of them just the same. Bigger means more loss, more trouble, more difficulty. And when you talk to the people at the larger churches, they go apoplectic about all the people that are leaving their church. And smaller means you have more capacity in your own human capacity to pay attention to what is going on. Because your brain's only so big, you can't remember 4,000 people. You can barely remember 100 people. Well, I would argue that you can't really pay attention to even 100 people because you have other people in your life. You've got family to be concerned about. You've got friends you need to maintain relationships with. One of the things that happens with pastors, they get lonely. They give all their attention to the people of the church, and eventually the church says, bye-bye, we don't need you anymore, pastor. Whether it's his fault or not is not the point. And then he's out of a church and he has to form all new friendships again. It's really a difficult thing. So you don't need to get to know everybody. You have to have a church that gets to know everybody. Smaller is a tremendous advantage. Ordinary is a tremendous advantage because you can give attention to the people that God gives you. If you don't pay attention to every person that God gives you, you don't get at the person who's behind that person, and so on. You have to show love to everybody and show care for everybody that God gives you. If you don't, your church is going to leak. So there's only 3 things that you can really count in here. There are systems and attitudes and programs that apply to the other 2. You can ask the question, who's in here? Not who's in here today. You'll notice that attendance isn't one of the 5 things that we're measuring here. Attendance is worth measuring, but it's not in the process. Who's in here? Who belongs to this church? Who's on the outer edges of the church that we might be able to talk to and engage them a little more? Breakthrough Pathways as a system is designed to work with those people who are kind of out there who may be waiting to be asked, are you interested in taking it up or not? Acquisition, who's new here? Passively, some people are going to find you. But you need to have some activity that goes and just says 9 words to people. People are open to an invitation to church. It takes 9 words. I'd like to invite you to my church. That's really simple. You might preamble it with, I've never asked you this before. This might not be your cup of tea. I just thought that I should ask you this question. It may seem out of the blue, but like to invite you to my church. It's not actually a question. Well, we'll drill down on that when we get further in the acquisition stuff going forward. And attrition. Once somebody is gone, going after them to try and reclaim them is a fool's errand. I've talked with people who in some churches have just been abused by visits from small groups of people to say, you need to get back into church. It's too late at that point in time. They've formed an opinion. Attrition is going to happen. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. There are three things that are obvious, that are countable. The adherents, I call it the home pool, the people who say, this church is my church. The assimilation, the new people that are coming in, and attendance just simply overstates it. It's somewhat useful, but it's not absolutely useful because you've got to drill down, open up the windows behind the actual attendance. There's 4 taps, turn on, comes in, 4 drains, goes out. You could control the tap much more than you can control the drain. You can control the drain to a degree, but this adherence is the people who are here. And the outflow, if the outflow of the people who are moving away, drifting away, dying off, if that outflow is greater than the inflow, you're definitely going to die. It's, if a church has 20 quiet years, the church closes. If the church has 20 active years, church doubles. I'm going to explain that to you. This is a mathematical approximation. This is not technically mathematically true, but it's easy for you to use this. There's a kind of a trick. If you multiply the number of years that's happening and the percent of growth or decline, it will always add up. It'll not add up, multiply out to 72. So if, for example, your denomination is growing by 3% a year, it doesn't sound like much, does it? If your denomination, your family of churches, or your local church is growing by 3% a year, you will double in 24 years. If it is leaking by 3% a year, you might not even notice it. You won't notice even a 6% leakage, but it'll be dead in 24 years. If you double that number and make it 6% more coming in than are going out, or 6% more going out than are coming in, it's 12 years. Your church can die in 12 years. It can die in less than that. In general terms, half your church is going to move away in 5 or 6 years. You're going to move out of your community. If your church, well, we'll get into this later. But if your church is largely older people, they tend to be less mobile, so it doesn't leak that much. But you can always quickly, without being any kind of a mathematician, you could take a look and see if we've got more people this year than we had last year, then we may grow. If we've got fewer people who are in the home pool, not the attendance number, although the attendance number counts, and try to get your attention off of the attendance. If the home pool number is growing, you will grow. The home pool number is diminishing, you will die. I don't care what the quality of your music is, the quality of your programs. I care about the quality of your programs, don't misunderstand. But it isn't a matter of, well, if we had a sermon series on this, then things would go fly. If we had better preaching, if the preacher would dress differently, if we redecorated the auditorium, if we took out the pews and put in chairs. I'm not against any of that stuff, but just mathematically, this is what's under it all. Now, you might test all the other things that you might want to test, but you must, particularly if you're a prime leader. I use that term for the pastor of the church typically, but sometimes the prime leader is just the lead elder. Many are school teachers and bivocational, and they don't even have a title other than maybe board member or something like that. If I just say prime leader, if you're really the prime leader in the church, you got to be paying attention to these things. Look, there's 4 ways in. Babies are born. We take note of that. But do you take note of babies born in your community who aren't from families of your church? It's highly likely that that family is more spiritually aware and responsive at the time of the birth of a baby. That's an open gateway for you. We'll talk about that later. You used to pay attention to that in bygone years. Don't anymore. People who move into the community. If you see a for sale sign on a house, all you got to do is keep driving by the house. And when the for sale sign is gone, it's for sure somebody has moved into the house. And if you take them a box full of goodies that says, here's, whatever, bottles of water and something we got from the hardware store as a welcome gift and so on. You go and drop that off to people. You could start a relationship with those people when they're arriving to town. Some of them will be already believers saying, well, we were thinking we'd look for a church in our third month. Once they get to their third month and they haven't found a new church, they're going to be church dropouts almost every time. And you can be the first one to get to them and welcome them to the community. You don't have to push them, but you just have to be a bit of a welcomer. People who are moving in, some of them are going to be believers, many of them are not. But in general terms, when people move from the first community to the second community, half of them drop out of church because the churches they visit aren't friendly. They're not the same as their old church. They can't solve all the problems. They don't even know when garbage day is yet. It's difficult. Then you got people who are converted. Now, this is kind of the direct evangelism track that, if you touch people, they're interested in talking about spiritual things. I've got a whole system of the cultivator's grid. Not sure it's going in this book or another book. I can't remember. But it shows how people will move slowly. It's a long ramp up to the front door of the church for people who have never had church experience before. And you can make a difference by paying attention to that ramp and patiently work with people, because you can communicate personally, voice to voice, person to person, face to face, and you can communicate by text with friends. It's amazing what texting does. Just before I came to the broadcast, I had an old friend saying, do you want to go to the baseball game for the Toronto Blue Jays? I said, the fish swim? Is the Pope Catholic? I canceled grandmother's funeral to come to a ball game with you. But that's a text communication. That was very real. It wasn't voice to voice. But we do have a strong voice to voice, person to person relationship. It's just an easy and convenient way. I mean, I know today, if in houses today, people are texting their children to say it's supper time. I used to get yelled at, I'm hungry dinner. It's all different today, but it's all the same because it's all about relationships. And conversion sometimes is much, much more than a quick down and dirty 3-circle presentation. I actually personally like the 3-circle presentation. I've extended it to 4 circles because I add my own personal responsibility. You're not going to be mad at me for sharing this, but you really think that because God gave me this job to tell you about this, whether you take it or leave it, and it kind of defuses the situation a bit, and it also gives them some time to think about. But again, we'll get into that later. That's so much more that I want to share with you that can happen in the ordinary church. It doesn't happen in bulk. You're not going to have 100 baptisms on Easter Sunday in an ordinary church unless God breaks out in a sizable revival that nobody's seen in hundreds of years. Then you've got this whole group of people, which is a large group of people of reclamation. They were hurt by somebody. Something went wrong in their life. They're not necessarily talking about it first, but you can sometimes show them some love and respect and interest, and slowly but carefully, don't dial it up to 11 and say, you can get back to church, but maybe come in at 3 and just say, yeah, a lot of imperfect church people in churches, a lot of imperfect leaders. Something that people will let you down. They will fall away and they will sin. But Jesus is the same. And maybe those who have drifted, they still have a yearning in their heart, a hole in their heart the restless, and they need it filled. You can reclaim people. So there's 4 ways in. Okay. There's a corresponding 4 ways out of a church. The 4 drains. Die. This is about the only one where we announce the exit. So there's a funeral and everybody finds out about it. Or they move away. You can't stop whether somebody's moving away. And if they leave your church and go to the mega church down the road, get over it. It's going to happen. You can't replicate the programming over there. Don't even give it a second thought of trying. Don't try to be like them. Don't. After your shoe size, folks. If you got a size 4 shoe, don't try and pretend you've got size 10 feet, because you just haven't. You can't be like the other. You won't be the same kind of communicator as the guy who's in the famous church. You won't even be able to afford the same pair of sneakers that guy's in. So don't. 2 Corinthians 10:12. Stop it. Quit comparing yourself with the other guy. You'll have people who deny the faith. I don't mean that they deny you. They absolutely deny the faith. They say, I thought I was a Christian, but I've given up on Christianity. And they really hurt. And you still got to keep loving those people. But if you dwell on those people, your church is going to leak. So they're the hard people who just make a definite break with Christianity because of poem. And then there's the slow fade, the slippage that happens. People who used to once be here, and now they're not here in it. You can't love them all, but you have a church that loves them. So every way in has its match on the way out, and we're going to deal with each of them going forward in depth and things that you can do. The main way in, the valve you can turn on is welcoming people and figuring out how to assimilate people. And if somebody comes in and and nobody's talked to them in the first 3 Sundays, they're not coming back. They're going to check out somebody else. So this is really 8 numbers for you to consider when it comes right down to it. 4 on the way in, 4 on the way out. If you take a look at your church directory or the number of people, you might be able to say, okay, these people moved in, that's 4 families, and this person died, and that's 1. And you can add it up. If you keep track of it, it's not hard. It's about 2 hours every year. Not more than that. You don't prefer you have software, and I can help you with that. But you don't need systems so much as you need a few people who are really attuned to who's in the church, sitting down and saying, okay, what do we got here? And add this up and then decide what we're going to do about it. See, the numbers don't really matter, but it's a list of names, the numbers. If you don't have their phone number, why don't you have their phone number, their cell phone number in particular? If you don't know their address, why don't you know their address? Somebody knows their address. So if you don't know, it's just, go knock on their door. If you just think of the numbers and say, oh, wow, look, the attendance was up 10%. Oh, it was down 10%. No, it's going to be a sawtooth pattern up and down over the months and over the years. And you can make a difference by paying attention. Every time someone falls away, they have a name that fits old what's his name. That's part of why they fall away. You can do this. You have access to this information as much as any large church anywhere. The large church will have to do it with software. You won't. Is that great? You don't have to buy the software. Somebody will try and sell you the software, and it's to be sure. And I'm not saying don't buy it if you can afford it, but software is not going to solve your problem. You're going to solve your problem because you care. People have got to pay attention to all of those things. Now, I promised you we're going to give you a workable solution. I think that you can see today, I just gave you a workable solution. You can sit down, even if you don't have a computer, you can write it down on paper, take just one evening and sort it out. This is going to lead to an evolution, not a revolution. You don't need a whole new set of LED lights and a smoke machine and, some rock guitarist to lead your band and change all the music so that you're cool. No, no, no. Small shifts are going to make a real change. You got to start counting differently. If all you're counting is nickels and noses, you are not paying attention to the church God is. Let that sink in. If all you're counting is nickels and noses, generally speaking, people have one nose. If all you're counting is money and attendance, you're going to have trouble. You're leaving all the rest to happenstance. Adherence is not attendance. Attendance is not adherence. The people who adhere to you, even not super sticky, but adhering to you, are the total group that you've got. You've got to find ways of not saying, well, they know where we are. They know what time we meet. They have to accept some responsibility for this. Why would you even say that? Of course they have to accept responsibility. It's not a point. You can't absolve yourself of your responsibility to reach out to the one when the 99 are safe. You've got a responsibility to work with the one. And that's what Jesus said, and that's what's always true. Every person is unique. They come at their own speed. They go at their own speed. So there's no, I get so frustrated with say, well, our community has 32% of this kind of people. Yeah, that's true, and it's somewhat valuable, but doesn't change anything. Because what you've got to recognize is that everyone is unique. They're not a statistic. They're one person, and you have to actually not just communicate one way to them, but to develop a two-way set of communication. If you don't keep track, who will? See, that is the main thing that you've got to pay attention. How am I going to start making myself keep track? I would recommend that you do so early in the week before your memory starts to fade. And I would recommend that you write things down, jot them on a piece of paper, put them in a note on your computer. That's not particularly relevant. Recognize that every single person is someone that Christ died for. Paul says that. One died for all is everybody. And everybody in your community is small, though maybe a village of 200. Something like that. You have a catchment here much larger. And everybody who may live 10 miles away, 10 minutes away, has a network of people around them. And it's all about one person. You're just the same as that big church that doesn't often pay attention to the one person. Too busy with their new LED lights and sound system, everything else. You don't need those distractions. You have an advantage. And I sincerely hope that you start taking advantage of your advantage right away. God bless you, and we'll catch you next week. And smash that subscribe button and pass it on to your friends. Sit down with a pastor friend and say, or what Carter talked about here. I'm confused about what he was saying on this, that, or the other thing. Get the pathways working in your life, and you will find that you have more joy, more possibility. I'd go on for hours. Catch you next week.